Hello and welcome to this Sporting Planet, your global view of sport. From London, I'm Natalie Sawyer.
And coming to you stateside, I'm Todd Harris.
And from Singapore, I'm Edward Russell.
This is the brand new podcast where we bring you the world of sport directly to your doorstep. You can check us out on social media, listen wherever you get your podcasts, and also watch us on YouTube. There's even a website for you to check out. Just head to thissportingplanet.com.
This episode, we're continuing our review of 2024. We'll reflect on Afghanistan's remarkable run at the T20 World Cup, the biggest golfing stories from the last 12 months, including an American win at the Solheim Cup, and who's shown at the end of the domestic football season in Europe.
Well, this is the second part of our review of sport in 2024. And if you're starting here, make sure you head back and listen to our first episode where we spoke about the NFL playoffs, the Super Bowl, Swift Mania, and Ivory Coast's win against the odds at the Africa Cup of Nations. Now, we're beginning to move towards the middle of the year. Where does the sporting attention turn in your regions? Ed, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, just as we had the conclusion of the European football seasons, we had the conclusion of the Asian football seasons as well, the finals of the A.F.C. Cup and the A.F.C. Champions League, both the final iterations of those tournaments before they changed tack for 2025.
All right, Todd, what about you? What are you going to bring us?
Well, from the USA, it's got to be golf, and more golf. At this time of year, Major League Baseball starts and the NBA wraps up its regular season. But from April to May, golf captures the attention of U.S. sports fans. In 2024, American men dominated the majors, and there was drama on and off the course.
Lots to look forward to. We're also going to round up some of the cricket with the T20 World Cup. American interest, interestingly for us to focus on as well, Todd, a little bit later on. But you mentioned it there, Ed. We've got to talk about the football, haven't we? Because the European football, of course, came to a close as spring turns to summer. We're not going to talk about the Euros. That's for another pod a little bit later on. But the domestic football seasons, of course, came to a close with new or perhaps very familiar names crowned champions in the likes of the Premier League, Bundesliga and La Liga as well. And it was a case of deja vu here in the Premier League. Manchester City winning the Premier League for a record fourth time in a row. No team has ever achieved that feat in the top flight of English football. Quite remarkable what Pep Guardiola and his Manchester City team have been able to achieve. And also elsewhere, we should point out Real Madrid winning a 36th La Liga title. And in France, Paris Saint-Germain made it 12 titles with their win in Ligue 1. But it's really interesting to know, I suppose, where European football stands in America, Todd, because obviously there's the boom of football or soccer in America now. So is there still as much interest as there might well have been in the past?
Oh, I think so, and then some, Natalie. I think the fact that it is really considered the best of the best when you talk about the Premier League and what they do and the talent they have there, and of course across all of Europe with Liga, and you go to Germany, you go to France, Spain, everything. There's just so much good football or soccer over there. And I think one of the big stories that we'll be talking about maybe a lot in 2025 will be the influx of American owners and influence. I think of what's happening in a team that's in the championship right now with Burnley, with Alan Pace as a chairman there. And he's bringing in not only investors from around the world, but big name investors like J.J. Watt, former NFL player. And so I think the influx of Americans with money is also turning the influx of Americans with eyeballs. And I know here in the States, we get a lot of Premier League, a lot of La Liga on our regular channels. So I think it's going to continue to be a big story. And again, everyone always wants to see the best of the best.
I think what's interesting when you mention the American ownership side of things coming over to England, it's not just the Premier League that they're interested. Yes, Burnley now are in the Championship. They were in the Premier League not that long ago as well. But you've got Birmingham with American owners, Tom Brady involved in that one. And let's not forget what's happening at Wrexham as well.
Welcome to Wrexham.
Exactly, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. They are putting eyes on not just the Premier League, Ed, but beyond that, the Football League as well.
Yeah, they seem to like a good project as well, or they seem to like being able to buy cheap and then selling high. I don't know what it is, but yeah, some real fairy tale stories. And of course, when you talk about Wrexham and the likes of Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney, they've got that entertainment experience, much like we saw with Netflix, and they turning Formula One into this massive entertainment product, not just a sport product. The Americans really seem to be really skilled at bringing eyeballs to a sport and making it into a Hollywood movie, I guess.
And Real Madrid, as we mentioned, Todd, winning that 36th title, and it was Jude Bellingham's first season at the club at just 20 years old. Coming into a club like Real Madrid, who are just so incredible, have that rich history, not just in La Liga, but on the Champions League and the European front as well. He finished the season as top scorer for Real Madrid in the league. I think it was 19 goals. Clearly, no issue dealing with being a Galactico and the pressure that comes with that.
Yeah, and the youth, you touched on it, just how young he is and how poised he is. He plays. I know the fans for the English national team wish he could do the same thing for them and they could bring it home. But I think it's going to be interesting to see I won't say the onslaught, but the introduction of youth. I mean, we saw a little bit of that at the Euros. Just the talent level and how young these athletes are getting and being put on the biggest stages. I mean, we're talking 16-year-olds performing on the biggest stages. Jude Bellingham at 20, 21. It just seems like, wow. But then that makes me think, how long can they go? Are they going to get burned out? I mean, we're seeing at the end of Lionel Messi's career as it's coming to a close in Miami. Now he's going to go out with a proverbial golden parachute, but it's been quite a career. And I see, we talked about this in one of the earlier episodes about the handoff in sports. We're seeing it in tennis. Are we now going to see it in football and soccer?
And we're seeing Kylian Mbappe, still very much a young man, of course, struggling a little bit at Real Madrid
Yeah.
since he moved over. Just on the subject of Jude Bellingham, from an English perspective, Natalie, do you feel that one of the reasons why he's able to prosper there is because he's away from the glare of the British media?
I think it's a good point. I think that's a really good point, actually. I think it also helps that sort of the way he's been brought up, the fact that his mum lives with him in Spain, whereas his dad stays over here with his younger brother, Joe Bellingham, who's at Sunderland. I think that helps as well. I think he's just got the right people around him, making sure that he stays relatively grounded. It's very difficult when you're that Galactico status that he's now earned himself. But yeah, I think that also helps that he's got away from the limelight over here, and we have no idea what he gets up to on his days off because we don't have the paparazzi bringing us those pictures. And maybe that's partly because they're not interested so much in Spain either, so we don't see it. But I think it has helped. And I think it also helps to show others you can do this too, in the sense of it's good to move abroad. It's good to try something new.
Right.
Yeah, it's great to have people backing you and giving you that support like he has with his family. But if you have that chance, who knows what you can go on to achieve. And look, he went to Germany first, didn't he, from Birmingham? Yeah. And, of course, we didn't even mention the Bundesliga, which was one of the most exciting stories from Europe in 2024, when Bayer Leverkusen secured the Bundesliga title in a season where they went unbeaten for the whole campaign. Jack Winstanley has been speaking to Sport Bill journalist Philip Arens, who's covered Leverkusen for the best part of 2 decades, and they began by discussing how important football is for that part of the country.
What kind of place does football hold in the hearts of just your local Leverkusen fan or local Leverkusen resident?
Yeah, Leverkusen is a city with 160,000 inhabitants, very connected to the Bayer company, the pharma company. You know, they called the Werkself, the factory team. And of course, the Bayer, the company, is also the club here. So there is a really close relationship between the factory and the football team, and this year this culminated, and the whole city went crazy. And weeks before the game against Werder Bremen, when they became champion, the city was dressed in black and red, and even the street behind the stadium, which is the big Bismarckstraße, was renamed in Xabi Alonso Allee. And this is quite interesting. And so you can see there was a great hunger of being German champion for the first time, because, as I mentioned, they were so close so many times, and this year they've done it.
That day when Leverkusen secured the title against Werder Bremen, can you just take us to the city? Take us inside. What were the celebrations like? What was it like to be there and as Leverkusen won that famous title?
Yeah, it was the 14th of April, a really warm Sunday afternoon. And as I mentioned, the Bismarckstraße, the Xabi Alonso Alley, this is the street, the road where the bus is coming to the stadium every game. And here in Leverkusen, the fans in the last years made some bus receptions with fireworks and pyrotechnic. And even when the team was struggling a relegation battle 2 years ago, when Xabi Alonso came, which is quite astonishing as well. When he took over, Leverkusen was in 17th position, which is unbelievable to say. But this bus reception on this day, it was unbelievable. About 10,000 people on the streets, or even more, and fireworks were flying, and the bus was not e- even able to pass. And yeah, it was something like a carnival in summer. Here in the Rhineland, we have the big carnival in February or March, but this was football carnival, and you could feel there was something special on this day. It should have happened on this day. On the day before, if Bayern Munich would have lost against Cologne, if would Stuttgart have would lost against Frankfurt, they would have become German champions on the sofa. And nobody wanted this. Everybody wanted to have it in their own stadium, on their own victory. And so yeah, it, it was this day, and 14th of April was the beginning of a new era in German football.
I think if we could zoom out a little bit, have you noticed a more international appeal of Leverkusen in the last year? And journalists getting interested in what the club are doing, and potentially people like me asking you to have a chat about it. And if you have noticed that, what's that been like for you and for the club?
Yeah, personally, I can say that a lot of journalists from all over the world ask me what has happened in Leverkusen, which has never been before like this. And of course, the club made two trophy tours. They went to the US, they went to Brazil, taking the trophies with them. And because they have a great Brazilian community, because of the tradition with 24 players from Brazil coming to Leverkusen. And even in the United States, in New York, German football is admired. And I think maybe Leverkusen is more admired abroad than in Germany, because Leverkusen is still in Germany by a lot of fans called a plastic club, a factory club, and this is something in abroad. It's a normal club, because Leverkusen had a great story about with great players like Ballack, Lucio, Rudi Völler all over the years. As I said, maybe in outside Germany, um, this achievement is more admired than in Germany itself.
Pippo, thank you so much for joining us on this Sporting Planet.
It was a pleasure for me. Thank you very much.
And for more from that interview with Philip Arens, you can check it out on our This Sporting Planet YouTube and on our website. The headline of the article is Leverkusen No More. And that is what is so remarkable about this story, because mocked by your rivals, 5 times a runner-up, you've been called Leverkusen, to not only then go and finally win that Bundesliga title for the first time, but you do it as an invincible. Ed, you know what it's like to support an invincible side. It's quite incredible.
It is. And I just loved that team spirit as well. And very much like that Arsenal team, they never knew when they were down and out. So many occasions where it looked like the run might come to an end, where they might pick up their first loss of the season. And they just believed in themselves. And out of nowhere, they were able to come back. And I think that team spirit was really instilled by Xabi Alonso, and really highlighted by the fact that he decided to stay when there was so much demand for him from Liverpool. And he came out, didn't he, and said, I decided to stay at Leverkusen because the players have given me so many reasons as a team, their commitment, their desire, their hunger to have a great season. And my job's not over here. And there's that real collective spirit, which I absolutely loved watching Leverkusen that season.
And Todd, what's so fascinating as well is not only that they go the season unbeaten, but they had a manager there who was relatively new to management life. He was at Real Sociedad a couple of seasons before, Real Sociedad B team. I think he was only there for 1 or 2 seasons. Then comes to Bayer Leverkusen, who was struggling towards the bottom end of the Bundesliga, gets them up into 6th into Europe in his first season in charge. And then the second season, he goes and wins the title. And no wonder he's then since been linked with other clubs.
Oh, no question. I think it's one of those cases where winning solves all problems. But I agree with you. I think the meteoric rise in such a short amount of time, which we see across the landscape of European football, especially, it takes a long time to build a team. I mean, you talk to any of the top managers and they're going to say, we're not going to fix this overnight. This isn't welcome to Wrexham. It's going to take some time to get this thing going, and it's going to take some time to get our team where we want it to be. And that's obviously picking up players in the trade season, finding ways to shore up your squad that's coming up as well, youth program. So, anyways, long story short, it's a great accomplishment across the board, and it's a great story.
It is. And I was very fortunate actually to speak to the managing director of sport for Bayer Leverkusen, Simon Rolfs, a few months ago. And I asked him about why Xabi Alonso. And he said a lot of it was down to, one, who he is as a person, but also what he's achieved in his playing careers. And as Philip Arens was telling us there, 18 titles across a number of clubs, across different leagues, just goes to show the respect he might have already commanded when he walked through in that dressing room. And interestingly, you talk about the reach. Well, they went on a trophy tour to Brazil, which just goes to show how popular they may well have been, or how certainly people wanted to see Bayer Leverkusen
Do you
out
guys
in
think
Brazil.
that his age had something to do with it? I mean, he's only 42, but I think the guys that are playing underneath him still remember when he was playing at a high level.
Well, absolutely, because he's fresh in their memory. Absolutely, Ed.
And you look at Mikel Arteta at Arsenal as well. I think that the younger players perhaps are more able to respect players that they've seen play rather than the older, the likes of well, Pep Guardiola, I guess, is still very much of that generation. But even say Antonio Conte now, that the current players probably might not remember his playing days and might not buy into his philosophy because of that. It's interesting you say that trophy tour to Brazil, Natalie, because you look at Bayer Leverkusen's squad, it is so international. You've got Nathan Teller, Nigeria, Granit Xhaka, of course, Swiss, Jeremy Frimpong, Dutch, Aleix Garcia, Spanish, Palacios is from Argentina. And it really is such an international squad, and no wonder they've got fans all around the world.
Yeah, very much so. Well, look, let's talk more football because it didn't just happen in Europe. Todd, what happened with you?
Well, you talk about look at the Mexican side of Pachuca. They beat Columbus Crew, and they look very good as they get ready to make a run there. But it was funny after that match, Columbus Crew coach Wilfred Nancy. He claimed that it was a bout of food poisoning prior to their match with Pachuca that affected his team's performance. I don't know if you can put it all up to food, but obviously when we go to Mexico, they always say don't drink the water. So maybe that's what happened there.
Well, it's a bit like Lasagna Gate. Do you remember that one with Tottenham when they were going for the Europe one a few seasons ago? Yeah, reminiscent of that, but we'll gloss over that one very quickly. Ed, what about you? Anything to mention from Asia?
Yeah, of course, the A.F.C Champions League, A.F.C Cup finals. It was the last time that those finals would have been played for those tournaments because now this season we have a three-tier A.F.C Champions League Elite, A.F.C Champions League 2, and A.F.C Challenge League. So we'll start with the A.F.C Cup final, shall we? The Central Coast Mariners, champions in their debut in the tournament, defeating Lebanon's Al Ahad FC 1-0 thanks to a late Alou Koual strike. The tournament was played in Muscat after being moved from Beirut in Lebanon due to tensions in the region. So Mariners becoming just the second Australian club to win an AFC competition, a decade after the Western Sydney Wanderers won the AFC Champions League on their debut as well. There's something about Australian sides making their mark at their first appearance in a major tournament. That win, by the way, for the Mariners, part of a treble for them. They won the A-League and the A-League Men Grand Final as well. Can I just say, Alou Koual, we talked about players from different countries coming through the youth systems and everything like that. He is such a story. He scored that winning goal, but he's a bit of an icon in Australia. His family and him moved from South Sudan when he was 3 years old due to tensions in the region, moved to Australia and was part of the Mariners Academy from very young on. He then worked as a kitchen hand while playing youth football. And we talk about the Bundesliga being an international league. He actually did spend some time playing for Stuttgart before then moving back to the Mariners and scoring that decisive goal in the AFC Cup final. So fantastic to see him, first of all, being from South Sudan, but now very much representing Australia at under 23 level, and I'm sure in the full international squad very shortly as well. And AFC Champions League final, that went the way of Al Ain from the United Arab Emirates. It's a bit of a weird one, the AFC Champions League final. It's actually played in over two legs, which I guess to some would be more fair because you get to play at home and away instead of just having one neutral venue. And you do get to have, your full vocal home support for at least one of the matches. It was contested between Yokohama F. Marinos from Japan and Al Ain from the UAE. In fact, the Japanese side won the first leg at home 2-1, but then Al Ain destroyed them in the second leg 5-1 to win 6-3 on aggregate. And we talk about sport in the US, Todd. That means that Al Ain qualified for the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup, which, takes place in June in the US next year.
Yeah, it's an interesting story there, how that all played out. I want to go back just a second as the elder statesman of this group. Can we give a shout out to Tony Cruz getting his fifth
Yes.
Champions League medal? I mean, Tony Cruz, what a career he's had. Real Madrid, obviously, Bayern Munich, 34 trophies in a 17-year career. That is not too shabby.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? And the fact that you don't always get a fairy tale ending. We're talking about Leverkusen and their unbeaten run coming to end against Atalanta. Tony Cruz, his last game in white for Real Madrid, of course, that
Yeah.
Champions League win, and then he probably thought he would retire from international football with a Euros title because they were the heavy favourites going into it. But hey, you can't always get what you want.
But you know what? Bowing out with a Champions League medal for the fifth time isn't too shabby
Yeah,
at
not
all.
bad, not bad.
I think he has enjoyed a pretty decent career. That is all the football wrapped up. Let's switch our attention, shall we, to golf in 2024. And Todd, in the men's game, it was American domination once more when it comes to the majors.
That's right, Natalie. April in the U.S. is the start of the major season, which runs in the U.S. until May before heading to Europe for the British Open in July. Before the Masters, there is a Players' Championship, which many in golf refer to as the fifth major for men. Now, Scotty Scheffler became the first player to win it back-to-back and then went on to claim his second Masters a few weeks later. Both those victories occurred while his wife was in the final stages of her pregnancy, and Scotty stated he would withdraw from the tournament as soon as she went into labor. Next is the USPGA, where Scotty was in the headlines for a non-golf reason when he got arrested and jailed for driving when the police told him not to. It was a misunderstanding, and he was allowed to compete. The tournament itself was won by Xander Schauffele, who opened with a course record of 62. Can you believe that? At 62. He never looked back. He also triumphed at the British Open at Royal Troon. He is truly an exceptional player, and he seems to have ice running through his veins at the most pressure-packed situations. But for me, the most memorable major was the U.S. Open, where Bryson DeChambeau came from behind and he defeated Rory McIlroy. Now, remember, McIlroy was leading the tournament with 4 holes still to play, but 2 missed putts, both of them under 3 feet at the 16th and the 18th hole. And the shot of Rory McIlroy in the scores tent watching Bryson DeChambeau secure that victory are among the most iconic moments of 2024. And this marked DeChambeau's second U.S. Open title and his second major. So the U.S. men dominated the majors, as you say. Natalie, we had an excellent start in the women's majors as well, with Nelly Korda winning the Chevron Championship. And this was incredible, marking her 5th consecutive victory on the LPGA and making her only the 3rd woman to achieve that feat in LPGA history. And finally, just to wrap up the season, Scotty Scheffler winning the Olympic gold medal in Paris, the new father. What a year for him.
Yeah, as you say, with all that, the backdrop of what was going on with Scotty Scheffler, to be able to be that composed and do what he still was able to do. I mean, maybe that says more about the man than anything, but that is simply ridiculous and incredible at the same time.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he plays the way he plays, and that's his personality. He just does not get his personality. He does not get confused. He does not get upset about things. He just kind of plays metronome. Whether he just won the lottery or whether his dog just got hit by a car, it's just he just stays so calm throughout, and I think that goes to show just the kind of person he is. Just a great person. Maybe not the most exciting, maybe not the most dynamic off the field. And the journalists maybe say, "Oh gosh, this guy could give us a few more spicy quotes or maybe a little more drama in his private life." But he's just not that way, and I think you can really respect him when it comes on Sundays or moving days when he just has the steel and he has the skill to just push through controversy. Now, does he have some bad rounds? Of course he does. Everyone does, but gosh, his year in and year out, the consistency, it makes you think of someone like Tiger, the way he can play and rise to the occasion. But I think Xander Schauffele is going to be another name that we're going to hear more and more of because I think he's so good. Colin Morikawa is another name that I think in the golfing world that's just his trajectory is just on the way up.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about Americans. Nelly Korda, of course, over on the women's side of things, the women's majors, winning the Chevron Championship. But aside from that, it was really golfers from my part of the world who dominated the year in the women's majors. Amy Young from South Korea winning the KPMG Women's PGA Championship. 2 Japanese ladies, Yuka Saso winning the US Women's Open, of course, and Ayaka Furue winning the Evian Championship. And then Lydia Ko from New Zealand back on the list, the AIG Women's Open champion, and of course, Olympic gold. Not a bad year for her.
Well, one of the great stories, obviously, the Solheim Cup. It's so exciting to watch that. It's the female equivalent of the Ryder Cup. And most of the time, golf is an individual event, but sometimes it becomes a team sport, which you did again this year at this edition of the Solheim Cup in 2024. Of course, the Americans coming across that draw in 2023, looking to get the win in 2024. It was hosted at the Robert Trent Jones Golf Club, which is just outside Washington, D.C. And with that Washington, D.C. traffic, just getting to the course was like a story in and of itself. But the U.S. emerged victorious under captain Stacy Lewis, and I had a chance to catch up with her a little earlier. Talk about the Solheim Cup in general as it regards to the schedule on a whole on the year. Where does it fit in, and how does it rate with the other players?
Obviously the American players, European players, it is top of mind. It is I think you start thinking about the points, as soon as as one completes, it is our big event. It is the team you want to be a part of. You want to win that trophy. You don't want to be a part of a losing team. And we finally, I think it was great for the event that we finally won.
Right.
You don't ever want things to be too one-sided. So it was obviously it was great for us this year.
I think you played in your first Solheim Cup back in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got some good experience with the event. Why do you think it's grown in popularity so much over the last 4 or 5 years?
I just think it's so different from every other event you have, right? It's just different. It's not your normal golf. Your fans can go there and be loud. It's smaller. It's more intimate. There's not so many groups.
Right.
Everybody's in one place on the golf course, and I think that's a lot of it. I think anytime you're playing for your country, for continent, whatever you want to say, I think there's a pride to that, and and it resonates with the fans. So we're continuing to try to grow it. I mean, still feel like I have to tell people it's the women's version of the Ryder Cup. So, we still got a ways to go in telling the world what the Solheim Cup is.
The growth in golf, especially in Asia, it seems to be just booming. It's just, waking the sleeping giant kind of thing, where they are coming on in such young talent at such young age coming up. Is that the new hotbed for women's golf?
Yeah, and to be honest, it's been there for a long time. I just don't think people have quite realized it. But I do think our going to play in Asia all these years has helped that talent kind of grow and foster. You look at all the Thai players. I mean, that is purely a result of the tournament that we have in Thailand and the exposure that they're given to the LPGA, and then the government is now putting money into growing those golf programs and giving those kids access. And so you're seeing it around the world, even in Europe. The money that's put into these federations to grow the players that are coming out there. I mean, you look at Q School they're trying to finish today with the weather, but Japan, Korea, tons of Europeans. That's what you see, and that's where I think, yes, we have this national team now with the United States through the USGA, but we're still missing the mark and how we're growing our American athletes.
Happy to be joined by Stacy Lewis, Solheim Cup captain here on This Sporting Planet. Stacy, as you look at golf as a whole, both men's and women's, sky's the limit. I mean, we're seeing payouts just keep getting bigger and bigger. Tournaments, the ratings on television seem to keep getting bigger and bigger. Even with the fracture with PGA and Live Golf, is golf on a whole in a good place?
That's a tough one. I don't know. I don't think probably not, to be honest. I think what's happened in men's golf has kind of trickled down to women's golf a little bit, and people aren't watching the way they used to. This fracture that's happened between Live and the PGA Tour hasn't been healthy for the sport, I
Right.
don't think. How they get back together, I have no idea. You have those guys take so much money. I just don't know how you come back from that. But I think overall we got to find a way to get more people to watch this game, because we're not. I don't think we're where we need to be. So it's the game has to be played faster. We got to find a way to modernize the game, similar to what baseball has done. I mean,
Yeah.
It's in a good spot, but I think there's a lot of room for growth.
Now, as far as you go, the Solheim Cup and your captaincy, does that stay in perpetuity as long as you want it? It's yours?
No, I mean, we actually have a call in a couple weeks to kind of figure out what we're doing next and where we're going to go. I mean, if I was asked, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I loved every bit of it. Getting to spend the time with the players and getting to know them the way I did. And was it stressful? Was it a lot of work? Yes. But those 2 weeks have been two of the most fun weeks of my golf career. So we'll figure it out in about a month or so.
And you can see more of my conversation with Stacy Lewis, the captain of the U.S. Solheim Cup, on our YouTube channel on This Sporting Planet. So, guys, what is our takeaway? I mean, Stacy gave us so much good information, saying that golf maybe isn't in the best of place right now. Would you guys agree?
I mean, I was quite surprised by that statement, really, from her. I do get the fractures that's happened with the Live Golf, and we've seen it. We've seen how Rory McIlroy was so outspoken
Right.
about being anti it. So I get that there are dissenters. I get that there have been issues, although, of course, we now know that Live Golf has partnered up with PGA Tour, for example. And we're now seeing a lot of these players welcomed back when it comes to majors and certain tournaments. But so I was still a little bit surprised. And something that she mentioned that I thought would be interesting to just pick up on is when she said that she felt like golf should go down kind of the avenue of baseball. But what have baseball done that she thinks is getting it right?
Well, they did institute a pitch clock, which speeds up the game. And for the folks that don't watch baseball a lot, some of the games can go long. I mean, you could push 4 hours. For the diehards, the purists who love the game, sitting there with a cold soda and maybe a bag of peanuts, go 4 hours. I don't care. I'm having a great time. It's better than being at work. But for the people watching on television, a game that can go under 3 hours, you really get more people that will invest that time. And I think a lot of sports are finding that. I don't say more is better, but confined, condensed, and give me quality over quantity. It might be the ticket. I don't know how that would play in Asia, in your part of the world, Ed.
No, I mean, hey, we're watching these tournaments in the middle of the night, so the quicker they can finish, the better. I can go back to sleep. Okay, so she didn't mean that she wants the golfers to run from one hole to the next then instead of taking a leisurely stroll.
I don't think so. I think it's just a quicker pace and less of the format.
We heard from Stacy there talking about how Asia has been a hotbed for a long time. It's perhaps only getting the recognition recently, just how well Asians are doing, but also how popular the sport is in this part of the world. And I was looking at a study that the RNA St. Andrews did recently in terms of golf participation. And actually, Asia is the leading region for people engaging with golf among RNA-affiliated regions. 26.2 million, they estimate, total adult engagement in Asia, as opposed to 19.7 million in Europe. The top two countries for golf engagement, Japan and the Republic of Korea. And of course, that is going to be largely down to the success of the women more so, I guess, in those countries. But great to see that the take-up here is so high.
And just finally, Todd, did we have an exclusive there from Stacey saying she'd like to captain it, the US team in the Solheim Cup for a third time?
Well, I think we do have an exclusive there. A good
Yeah.
pickup by you, Natalie. But I'm going to correct myself. 2023 was not technically a full outright win, but the Americans are going to claim it as a win and a tie. And then 2024 obviously was a very exciting tournament, and they'd get the victory. I don't know why they wouldn't bring her back, but I got to mention also that she's still an active player. I mean, she's a former number one, so she still has some good playing days ahead of her. You see the rise of Rosang, Nelly Korda, some of the young talent that's coming up, and then as she mentioned, so much good talent coming up from Edward's part of the world in Asia and Oceania. So I think that the golfing world, as far as women's golf is concerned, is in a very good spot right now. But again, there's obviously, on the wish list, things they would like to see better and do better.
I know Stacey's kind of against Live Golf and the split, but do you reckon we could see Live Golf for women at some point? Greg Norman always seems to tease it a little bit here and there.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly does. And I would say the short answer is yes. I mean, where there's a will, there's a way. And if the money's there, the players will follow. And I can't blame the players. Obviously, they're trying to make a living and trying to do the best they can. But I think there just needs to be less bickering and more good golf. And it comes down to that. And so you got to get a lot of people in the room to hammer out some details. But in the end, as the famous quote always says, the answer to all your question is money.
Let's move on to cricket, shall we? And in particular, the Cricket World Cup. And before we get on to the surprise package of the tournament, Todd, this was one that was pretty special because it was the USA that were involved in hosting this.
Yeah, it was very special indeed. June 29th, the final was played, and of course, it was played in the West Indies, but the U.S. was involved in the first ever, I don't know if you knew this, Natalie, the U.S. was involved in the first ever international cricket match. That was the USA versus Canada, and that was back in 1844. Now, for the Americans, cricket is not obviously one of their main sports. We don't call it one of the big three, but over 190,000 fans attended the T20 World Cup, and the matches in the USA, really good attendance there. Stadiums in the U.S., you had New York, you had Texas, you had Florida, and the ICC, they called it an incredible event for fan engagement, but obviously it was co-hosted by the West Indies. The U.S. hosted 16 of the 55 matches, including opening match versus Canada on June 1st. And of course, the U.S. is looking to build upon cricket as it makes its entry into the Olympics, and that will be in 2028, obviously in Los Angeles. But I'll tell you what, having the West Indies co-host this was a big deal as well, because they obviously have more history. Unfortunately, some of the drawbacks for the USA were the pitches not quite up to par. They had some issues with rain, heavy rain, obviously in the Florida area, but you got to have a quality pitch if you're going to bring the world's best. And that's one thing the U.S. will certainly need to work on going forward. They're learning, and that's the most important thing. And the highlights making it on to ESPN Sports Center. So clearly you're doing something right there. But again, in the end, India wins over South Africa. So a great tournament and all, and a great situation, obviously, for the Americans to get involved in cricket. Ed, for the USA to embrace this tournament, obviously a really big deal.
It is, and I do like the fact that they really made a spectacle out of it. I do think, though, if it is to grow in your part of the world, Todd, we need some better cricket pitches in the US, because some of them didn't really lead to a very enthralling tournament. A lot of games not being able to play. But yeah, so Afghanistan, they won't complain about how things went in the T20 World Cup. What an incredible feat it was for them to reach the semifinals for the very first time. This is Afghanistan, by the way, a country who's been torn apart through wars, suffered natural disasters. They had floods in May, actually, just before the World Cup as well. And Afghanistan captain Rashid Khan said that his team's success is really the only source of happiness back home in Afghanistan right now. Imagine the pressure on your shoulders, knowing that you are the only source of success in your country. This is a sport as well that has really just taken off in the past decade or so. I was reading a quote from Rais Ahmadzai, the former captain of the Afghanistan national cricket team, and he put it down to the fact, the popularity, down to the fact that it really took off in refugee camps near the Pakistani-Afghan border, and it transferred from a cricket crazy nation of Pakistan over to Afghanistan. The National Cricket Board in Afghanistan was only formed in 1995, only recognized as an affiliate member of the ICC in 2001, and now the sport's the most popular in the country and full of recognizable names all around the world. One thing, though, that has to be said, they have some really experienced players. I mentioned Rashid Khan, the likes of Mohammed Nabi and Shahidi as well, Hashmatullah Shahidi. But the players that really came to the fore in this World Cup were the youngsters. The 22-year-old batter, Ramanullah Gurbaz, he was the top scorer in the tournament with 281 runs. And Fazl Haq Faruqi, the leading wicket taker as well with 17 wickets, he's only 23 years old. So this generation can really cover new ground and really take Afghan cricket to new heights, I feel, in the coming years.
Well, let's hear more now from someone who's known as the voice of Afghanistan cricket, Devendra Kumar, a voice on BBC Test Match Special and someone who follows Afghanistan all over the globe. Devendra has become a trusted and loved voice for the Afghan people. He's been chatting to Jack Winstanley and began by explaining that their run at this year's T20 World Cup shouldn't necessarily come as a surprise.
Prior to that as well, in 2023 ICC ODI World Cup, they were phenomenal, beating 3 world champions, including England as well. England, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. So there was sense of determination about doing something and putting the country back on the map, because there had been a lot of discussion about what was happening politically. So the cricketers, they have always been hope for the Afghan people and great source of happiness for the countrymen. And the Afghan cricketers were committed to give something back to the nation, to celebrate, and that's why they were determined. I remember covering domestic tournaments, the National T20 Cup in Afghanistan, Kabul. And I could sense the sense of determination and in clear game plans of doing something or upstaging Australia, because Australia recovered from 91 for 7 and went on to win the match in the ICC ODI World Cup. So they were determined to beat Australia first. That was their only aim. And in between, many teams got rolled over because their focus was simply beating Australia. And they picked the right talent, and they understood the conditions really well. They sent the team 15 days before, so the planning part has improved a lot. And they have always been immensely challenged. It was all about just organizing, giving them the structure, and that's where I think Jonathan Trott played a significant part in giving the pathway to the players to succeed. And they made sure that they utilized the conditions. They made sure that they utilized the talent really well. I was not surprised that they went on to play the semi-finals. We all were expecting back in Afghanistan that this team has got the potential to do something monumental. And I won't be surprised in upcoming Champions Trophy if Afghanistan go on to win.
What was the atmosphere like during those victories? And from what you could tell, what was the reaction like back home in Kabul? I mean, you listed Australia, New Zealand, Bangladesh on the way to the semi-finals at the T20 World Cup. There must have been just overwhelming joy back home.
Overwhelming joy and kind of scenes that we see on football grounds. For example, when Argentina went on to win the Football World Cup in Qatar. So those kind of scenes were there in Afghanistan. They would celebrate whole night and during the day as well, throughout the week. It was a festive season for Afghans. And for the first time, they were so happy. From the beginning, they wanted Afghan cricketers to beat the big teams. And eventually, when they realized the dreams, it was dream, coming true, not only for the cricketers, but also for the fans as well, because they believed in their talent, their abilities to deliver on big stage. And it was exhilarating, watching people coming out in the streets. It united the country again. After the regime changed, there was some confusion and some chaos as well. But those victories in the ICC T20 World Cup lifted the morale of the entire nation. And it has given a great boost to the nation. And I won't be surprised in coming years, Afghanistan will become a major force, not only in T20 cricket, not only in one-day cricket, but in test match cricket as well. There's a keen desire to showcase their skills in test format as well.
Fantastic. And just finally, Devender, whilst there's lots of positives to talk about when it comes to men's cricket in Afghanistan, the future of women's cricket in the country is looking a lot less certain, isn't it? I mean, the women's side were banned from playing cricket when the Taliban returned to power in 2021. And that was before even they played a competitive match, because they'd only just been awarded contracts, hadn't they, at the back end of 2020. The team fled the country mostly to Australia. What's the latest with the women's cricket in Afghanistan, or at least Afghan female cricketers? And where does female Afghan cricket go next?
I think it's going to take time. There's a conscious approach from cricket board and conscious approach from some of the factions, because in the current regime, they want the women's education as well as the sport as well. It is going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, because the country has been into war for 40 years. It's such a long duration. And then sudden change in leadership and regime is something that was a shocking experience for Afghan people and administration as well, to cope up with all the threats coming in from different parts of the world. So it was important to reconnect and redevelop everything in Afghanistan. And so it's going to take time, but I'm hopeful. What I'm gathering, the different types of conversations taking place across the political spectrum, and as well as the cricket board and players. You may have read on the Twitter, Rashid Khan and Mohammad Nabi expressing their solidarity with the women cricketers and women in general as well. It's a cultural shock for a moment, but I think things will change. It's not going to remain like this. It may take 4 years, 5 years, maybe a decade, but things will change. And it's a cultural aspect. It's a political thing, and the cricket board cannot go against the political system. That is the thing that we have to accept it. But the best way forward is to engage Afghanistan cricket, because cricket is the only medium through which you can engage and bring about change in the country. Because everyone knows cricket plays a huge part in keeping the country together, and it's emotion for every citizen of Afghanistan. So cricket is the only way forward, and that's why I think what happened, Australia pulling out of the tour in United Arab Emirates a couple of years back, and that's something that hurt the sentiments of the common people of Afghanistan, because they wanted support in difficult times from Cricket Australia. And I hope that if they reconsider the decision and engage Afghanistan cricket, that is the best possible way to bring about change in society and cultural changes as well. By isolating Afghanistan, nothing is going to happen. It's going to be detrimental for the morale of the country. It's going to be very, very difficult for Afghan people, because they suffered a lot in the last 40 years, and they want some peace. And that's where they want support from the outside world, particularly encouraging the cricket team, which is showing some tremendous game over the years, and the way they've been able to perform in the last couple of years. I think they are a rising force, and they need some support from the outside world as well.
Devendra Kumar there, the voice of Afghanistan cricket, speaking to our Jack Winstanley. If you want to hear more from that, then you can head over to our This Sporting Planet YouTube channel.
Yeah, really interesting interview there. Devendra was mentioning about the impact that Jonathan Trott has had. That's been recognised. He's just actually received a one-year contract extension, so he'll be continuing in charge until the end of 2025. So he will oversee Afghanistan's debut in the ICC Champions Trophy in February and March next year, where Devendra says they could go on to win it. We do have to remember, in amongst all this talk of Afghanistan's fantastic run at the World Cup, that India did win it, breaking that 11-year curse of not winning an ICC trophy. And they did it in some style as well. The first ever team to win an ICC T20 World Cup undefeated. They beat South Africa in the final. The only match where they didn't win was against Canada in the group stages. Why was that? Because it was abandoned without a ball being bowled because of a wet outfield in Florida. See, you got to sort out your pitches, Todd.
Yeah, that's one thing where the Americans did struggle. But I think on the whole, as far as American fans go, it was a huge success. It introduced a lot of people to a beautiful game. And I think that interview that Jack had was really telling. I think it comes back to, why we do this show, this Sporting Planet, the power of sport to heal wounds and to make life better for people. Well, that will about do it for this episode of This Sporting Planet. Coming up, we're going to take a deep dive into the Olympics, which took place in Paris, the Paris Olympics and the Paralympics, guys. This was a huge global event.
Ed, you were there. I was there. We all loved it.
What were your highlights? What really stood out for you over there in Paris?
Well, I've mentioned, obviously, Armand Duplantis and his world record in the men's pole vault. But do you know what? It was building up to it. So many documentaries were released, weren't they? And you had the Netflix on Simone Biles. You had Sprint as well, focusing, obviously, on the track. So I was really looking forward to seeing what was going to happen in the athletics track, but also see if Simone Biles could bounce back, which I think we all expected she was going to do. But still, she's just so incredible when it comes to gymnastics. So I was just looking forward to seeing if she could do it and do it to the level we expected her to do it at.
Simone was one of my highlights as well after the twisties. It's the first time I've seen her in person, and you just wanted her to do well after what happened in Tokyo. And the fact that the minute she walked out, her very first appearance at Paris, she was just beaming from ear to ear. That smile, I was very, very close to her. I won't forget it. She just seemed to enjoy being out there once more, being in the competition, and also just leading that team as well to yet another gold.
And guys, let's not put the cart before the horse, because in the U.S., one of the biggest focuses on was at this time of year was the trials. I mean, just getting onto Team USA was a huge endeavor, not only from athletics, but the duel in the pool for swimming, who's going to make the squad, all the way down to who's going to make the skateboarding team, who's going to make the BMX team. The battle to get on Team USA was a monster event. And of course, all eyes then turning their attention to Paris in July. And what a show it was.
Yes, indeed. Cannot wait for that episode. But that is it for this episode. Make sure to subscribe to the show via your favorite podcast provider so you never miss out any of the conversation.
All right, again, next time our attention turns to Paris for the world's biggest festival of sport with the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And I've been chatting with Olympic gold medalist Gabby Thomas, so we'll have that as well. Plus, the domestic season's complete. It was international football, which took center stage with UEFA Euro 2024 and, of course, Copa America.
So from Ed, Todd and myself, as well as the whole of the This Sporting Planet team, thanks very much for listening.